Bystanders shouted, and a masked man grinned through a respirator, exposing the deception. Voices rose with someone crying they had been fooled. A red-eyed youth hurled insults, and a seated observer murmured about villain standards. Accusations hardened into blows. A sudden, heavy strike drove a figure into the wreckage and quieted the terrace under a haze of dust and anger. Dave had been driven into wreckage, and silence hung over the terrace under dust. A broad man stepped forward carrying a shoulder launcher and spoke to the crowd. He taunted the deceivers and asked whether they were satisfied with their lies. He then removed his shades, and the man's face shifted into a darker intent. Internal voices bared hatred of heroes and vowed protection for someone dear. Bystanders recoiled as the threat grew louder and the terrace tightened into panic. An unseen voice erupted from the terrace and accused someone of killing Dave outright. The speaker's face warped and glared white with rising malice. He declared the murderer obvious and named his target. The crowd recoiled as panic tightened. The scene cut to the terrace floor, where pink-haired woman shouted for Mr. Hawing to snap out. Rescuers hovered over an injured man, while one medic admitted the blood loss was fatal. A hooded figure offered a strange bargain nearby and watched reactions. Pink-haired woman's eyes narrowed as the accusations sank in. An unseen voice had erupted from the terrace and accused someone of killing Dave. The crowd recoiled as panic tightened. Rescuers hovered while a medic judged the bleeding likely fatal. Pink-haired woman had shouted for Mr. Hawing to snap out. A hooded figure watched and offered a strange bargain. The scene then focused on the unconscious man's moist lips. Someone declared the only way to wake a cursed prince was a princess's kiss. Pink-haired woman recoiled in disgust and shouted. A sudden water blast knocked people back and left her staring. The crowd recoiled as panic tightened after the accusation, and Mr. Hawing lay unconscious. Pink-haired woman placed both hands on his chest and began channeling bright energy. She begged the others to wait and vowed she would definitely heal him. A small animal rode her shoulder as the power curled around them. An emergency alarm began screaming, and a red evacuation overlay flashed across the area. Medics and bystanders scrambled toward exits while warnings ordered immediate evacuation. Before anyone could stabilize Mr. Hawing, a sudden strike detonated, throwing people and debris. The hooded watcher stayed distant as chaos swallowed the terrace. The terrace erupted into chaos after the fainting and the sharp accusation. Pink-haired woman pressed both hands to Mr. Hawing's chest and channeled a bright light. A small animal rode her shoulder as alarms screamed and evacuation overlays flashed. Medics and bystanders moved toward exits, but a sudden strike detonated too soon. The blast threw people and debris while masked assailants surged into the breach. They struck without warning, driving victims back and leaving blood across the terrace. A red-haired man collapsed under repeated blows as rescuers dragged the wounded to safety. The hooded watcher remained distant and silent above the unfolding violence still. The terrace had already tipped into chaos when a premature blast ripped through the crowd and masked assailants poured into the breach. Pink-haired woman had forced a bright pulse while alarms screamed, but the explosion still threw people and debris. Rescuers lunged for the wounded, even as attackers hit with brutal speed. A red-haired man staggered and collapsed under repeated blows while blood stained the stone. Then a towering, feral figure slammed into the ground and sent shockwaves scattering survivors. Above the violence, the hooded watcher remained distant and silent. The terrace had already tipped into chaos when a premature blast widened the attacker's breach. Pink-haired woman had fired a bright pulse, but it failed to halt the rampage. Debris alarms and frantic shouts filled the air as rescuers lunged for the wounded. A bloodied man staggered and screamed "Sister," while someone pulled at him. A towering feral figure crashed through the crowd and lunged with teeth and claws. Its bite tore through flesh and armor and splattered crimson across the stones. A survivor collapsed over a wounded woman to shield her, while an attacker grinned nearby. Above the violence, the hooded watcher remained distant, silent, and unresponsive to pleas. The terrace still throbbed with chaos as a wounded aspirant lay on the stones and spoke. Red-haired man clutched his chest and named the heroes who had shaped him. He said he had wanted to die like them and called his life good. He murmured a final promise about his dream and said goodbye while blood darkened the flagstones. Rescuers and survivors shifted past the fallen man. Then a yellow cape cut through the smoke. Costumed hero landed on a ruined ledge and looked down over the battered assembly and frozen attackers. The terrace still stank of smoke and blood as a wounded aspirant lay on the stones and spoke. Red-haired man clutched his chest and named the heroes who had shaped him and his path. He said he had wanted to die like them and called his life good while rescuers shifted past. A yellow cape cut through the smoke and costumed hero landed on a ruined ledge above the battered assembly. Voices cried out and the injured man begged the hero to act now. Costumed hero remained composed and answered not yet. The aspirant was struck again and collapsed while everyone waited in stunned silence. The terrace still smelled of smoke and blood as rescuers moved around the collapsed aspirant. Red-haired man had named the heroes who shaped him before he fell. Costumed hero remained on the ruined ledge and called for camera one. The director and on-set crew praised the angle and prepared recording drones. A drone powered up and the crew started a loud countdown. Costumed hero held a posed stance while technicians checked lines and the drone closed in. Everyone waited through the tense final seconds as the scene readied for capture. The terrace still reeked of smoke and blood as the crew finalized the shot. A breath fan stalled the drone and an assistant warned the team to wait. Costumed hero posed on the ruined ledge while technicians checked tether lines and camera angles. The drone closed in and the hero enacted a scripted struggle across the ruins. A desperate close-up captured the bleeding aspirant pleading for a more intense take. The director called cut after the frame. The cast and crew then relaxed and exchanged quick praise while the aspirant steadied himself. The set cleared after the cut and technicians reset for one final take. The costumed hero coaxed the bleeding aspirant to try a closer, more earnest pose. He adjusted his glove and wrapped the cape, pacing the ruined ledge to sell the scene. The aspirant watched, bruised but smiling, and mouthed that he saw the message of hope. Off-site viewers counted down on a phone while a drone and camera prepared to roll. At the final second, the director nodded and the live feed began. The room around the feed erupted with excited shouts as the scene resumed. The live take resumed as the costumed hero steadied the bruised trainee on a ruined ledge. He told the crowd not to be afraid and vowed to keep them alive. He launched into motion, dashing across the set to shield nearby bystanders. He struck a bold pose and shouted his slogans. The assailant answered with furious shouting and a green energy strike, berating the hero. The feed cut between the hero's fast charge and the attacker's retaliation. Onlookers flinched and the room erupted. The live take continued as the costumed hero pushed forward to shield the wounded trainee while the assailant screamed and unleashed a green attack. The attacker ranted and lunged as the hero braced for impact. A bystander interrupted with a flippant remark about the hero's fly, briefly cutting tension. The struggle plunged into water, limbs tangled and splashes flew as the hero and attacker grappled. At the scuffle's peak, a bright green portal opened off stage. A figure stepped through and called out provocatively. Onlookers gasped and the feed snapped to camera number 3. The live feed kept rolling as a grinning antagonist broke character and challenged the crowd. He barked orders and demanded kneeling while claiming to be the real villain on stage. Onlookers gasped and murmured as voices rose and cameras shifted. A hooded figure stepped forward and revealed red eyes and a protruding tongue, drawing shocked commentary about the broadcast. Viewers questioned whether this was staged. The costumed hero watched from the set, then smiled and said the moment would make a good scene. Tension moved from rescue to spectacle across the feed. The live feed had already shown a grinning antagonist-breaking character and demanding submission from the crowd. Viewers had questioned whether the spectacle was staged as a hooded figure revealed red eyes. The costumed hero had smiled and treated the moment as a scene to sell. Then the hero confronted the grotesque figure on stage and declared it a true villain. He unleashed a spiraling energy strike that slammed into the creature and scattered debris. A nearby man crumpled and gasped that a hostage had been taken. Cameras and onlookers reacted as tension shifted back toward rescue and uncertainty. The live feed shifted from showmanship to threat when the grotesque figure peeled back its mask and revealed green eyes. The costumed hero initially framed the moment as staged, but then called the figure a true villain. He launched a spiraling energy strike that slammed into the creature and scattered concrete and props. An onlooker collapsed and claimed a hostage had been taken. Cameras and crew scrambled while viewers and masked spectators gasped. A crew member warned that camera 2 was recording red. The hero declared judgment, grabbed the assailant, and struck again, driving them into the ground amid dust and alarm. The live broadcast had already shifted from showmanship to threat when action escalated. The costumed hero intensified his assault with spiraling strikes that shattered props and concrete. Debris and dust exploded across the set and knocked back stunned bystanders and crew. An onlooker crumpled and shouted that a hostage had been taken. Camera 2 flickered red, while on-set crew and viewers scrambled to adjust angles. The hero grabbed the assailant and drove them into the ground with brutal force. The barrage widened into a relentless flurry that pushed the crowd back and wounded several. A frantic voice cried, "Great nature now is the time," as the chaos peaked. The broadcast had already slid from spectacle into danger before the next move began. Man 1 shouted that the line could be red masks, finishing move to viewers nearby. The costumed hero clenched his hand and channeled bright energy into his palm. He called on fire, water, wind, and earth and demanded that they grant him power. Each element flared as colored glyphs and forces spun around his body with growing speed. Rocks, wind, water, and flame twisted together into a coiling mass around his fist. Debris scattered across the set as the assault began to harden into a single strike. Cameras and onlookers recoiled while the hero braced to release the finishing blow. Man 1 shouted as the costumed hero gathered fire, water, wind, and earth around his fist. Colored glyphs spun and debris lifted as the hero hardened the assault into a single strike. Cameras and onlookers recoiled while the finishing blow struck in a tornado of elements. The impact ripped the set and threw viewers to the floor. Man 1 declared the fight over and waited for the dust to settle. Suddenly, an unknown assailant struck the costumed hero across the head. He crumpled with blood on his face as the chaos kept spreading. Two small figures watched from the wreckage, stunned and helpless. Viewers on phones and monitors stared in frozen disbelief as the scene unfolded. The costumed hero's skull had been ruptured by the unexpected blow, blood spraying across his mask. Bone fragments and debris spun outward while he crumpled to the set. Two costumed figures in blue and red mirrored emotion and then lunged toward the fallen hero. They struck the floor and slid to rest beside him, their momentum spent. Phones in the crowd registered the chaos, then flashed bright, unrelated images. A voice barked from the wreckage while the room held its breath. Viewers on phones and monitors watched in stunned silence as the costumed hero collapsed. His mask had split and blood sprayed across the set while debris spun outward. Two costumed figures lunged and slid to rest beside him, momentum spent. Phones in the crowd flashed unrelated images, then froze on the chaos. A muffled voice barked from the wreckage, and the room held its breath. Confusion turned to fury when the red-haired man's chest flared with green energy. He screamed, then collapsed into manic laughter, while nearby masked figures echoed jeers. The red-haired man unleashed a towering crimson blast that shredded the ground and hurled debris outward. Viewers on phones and monitors watched the set in stunned silence as the costumed hero collapsed. His mask split and blood covered the floor while debris spun outward. Two costumed figures lunged earlier and now lay motionless on the cracked asphalt nearby. Confusion turned to fury when the red-haired man flared with green energy. He unleashed a crimson blast that shredded the pavement and hurled debris outward. A woman rose amid the wreckage, her body crackling with red power. A glowing hammer loomed behind her as she stepped forward. She scolded the crew and declared the shoot over. Crew and crowd froze under her command.